Hollow Knight is a must-play for anyone who is a fan of action, adventure, platforming and 2D games. Since it will be free to download in November as part of the PlayStation Plus bonus games, there is no reason to skip it if you have a PS4. The game is surprisingly deep with exploration and it has a compelling story. During the game, it's likely you'll feel a sense of dread while traversing hollowness without exactly knowing why. Hi, I am Mediocore at Hollow Knight, and in this video I'll do my best to explain why playing Hollow Knight is likely to fill you with a sense of dread and how the game nails that. And we'll be doing so without spoilers. Also, if you're new, appreciate content like this and were one of the cool kids in high school and you got to sit in the back of the bus because of it, you should consider subscribing so you'll be the first to know when a new video like this releases. With that out of the way, let's get right into it. You start Hollow Knight completely in the dark. You know nothing about the world you're in or the character you're controlling. Except that they have a sword called Old Nil. Their backstory and motivations are a mystery and the game does not have the decency to tell you. This makes you unsure what to expect from the game. Even though you don't know what to expect from this piece of art, the game does its best to set the tone from the start. Just look at the main menu. The music is dark and foreboding. But it does allow a glimmer of hope to shine through every now and then. The game offers only a quick tutorial covering basic movement and then leads you to the hub town above ground. The first NPC we meet is an old man that tells you that going underground does not work that well for most, as most don't return to the surface and some don't even want to return. Yet you press on and decide to brave the dangers underground. And so your journey begins. Once you go underground, the first structure you're likely to encounter is the Temple of the Black Egg. The character inside, Curl, tells you about the structure. There's something going on here that you don't quite understand yet. A little later into the game you come across a similar structure and you probably feel uncomfortable entering. This is for a good reason. It's dark as f*** and the only thing you can see are corpses everywhere. What happened here and what is going on around underground is kept ambiguous at all times. This ambiguity helps the game. You're eager to find out more, but you dread what it could be. Instances where things happen unexpectedly are all very common. Hollow Knight tries to keep you on your toes at all times. Wow, if this is a boss fight room, I'm going to be so surprised. Whoa. Haha, you can get me from there. Oh Phew, that was close and not at all edited. When you're a few hours into your first playthrough, you slowly start realizing that you have no idea why you're actually killing the NPCs, as the motivations of the player character have not been mentioned. The NPCs that you kill don't despawn immediately. This adds weight to your actions. Because you're forced to look at your transgressions, you start to realize that the game is pretty grim, and you slowly start to question yourself. But the game does let a light shine every now and then. Cornifer is a good addition to the game. He sells you maps for the areas you find them in and can be heard from far away with his signature humming. Since you're mostly by yourself, this sound is a welcome break from the dark tone of the game. Cornifer, is that you? I'm scared. Help me. You start associating Cornifer with safety and trust, because he can chart the areas where you so easily get lost in. You have to find Cornifer first to get a map, but he also helps you find yourself. Aww. The game also offers relief of some of the dread in the form of the bench saving system. These checkpoints serve as a brief respite. Just listen to this. The theme is sad, but also has a sense of hope in it, and it gives you the determination to save more than just your save file. However, the dread creeps back in when you find out what happens when you die in Hollow Knight. If you die, you leave a ghost on your corpse. You also lose all your money on death and you have to retrieve it from the ghost. That looks something like this. Once you progress further into the game, the enemies start becoming more mystical and start using weird attacks. This all happens very subtly. If you were to not pay attention to these developments, you might just miss them. This also helps with building dread. Getting new powers is satisfying at first, as it means that you now can reach places that were inaccessible before. But the things you have to do to get them in the first place are morally ambiguous. You start to wonder if your quest is because of noble intentions or not. But surely you cannot be the bad guy. You have been saving captured caterpillars all game. I am such a good person, probably. Alright, I returned your kids, now pay me. Hollow Knight uses a dichotomy between building and relieving dread so that the player is never uninterested or overwhelmed. Only to build them back up as you progress through the game is absolutely brilliant. Because of that, you are convinced that this NPC is an enemy, but nothing is what it seems at this point. You mostly get implicit information about the world and its history through subtle ways. You are very curious to learn more, but the game just doesn't give it to you yet. Finally, a wondrous journal, I can learn more. Forgotten dialect? If the forgotten dialect is English with a Dutch accent, you still won't learn anything, because no one could decipher that. It's only after a few hours into the story that you're explicitly told more about the world and the player character. You have been piecing together implicit hints about the story, but a big revelation in the story comes way later into the game. Why does the game keep its major plot points to itself for so long? I think the game keeps you in the dark on purpose, because the game wants you to feel dread and not fear. Fear is a strong, uncontrollable, unpleasant emotion caused by actual or perceived danger or threat. Dread is a feeling of unease or anxiety for something that is coming in the future. The difference is that fear is a direct reaction, while dread is an anticipation. This piece of dialogue is what leads me to believe that this was exactly what the writers were going for. Progressing through Hollow Knight is a dreadful experience, but not a fearful one. If Hollow Knight would have shown its hand right away, all the dread will be gone completely, transforming into fear or even disappearing altogether. For reference and to substantiate my statement, let's look at another game that absolutely nails the fear versus dread thing in my opinion. Bloodborne. I will not be going into the full story of Bloodborne in this video, as I could talk about that for hours, but the gist is this. A city finds blood that cures all diseases, but actually turns everyone into monsters. And then there are aliens or something, but there are no UFOs because it's set in Victorian England and UFOs would not make any sense. The story of Bloodborne is also very ambiguous and open to interpretation. The game rarely explicitly shares its plot points and much of the lore is told via item descriptions and loading screens. It is by staying vague that it manages to make you feel dread progressing. You're not sure what there is to fear, but you know that none of it is good news. The horror in Bloodborne does not directly come from explicitly scary elements like jump scares and undefeatable monsters, but rather from the mystery and uncertainty. This gives you plenty to dread, but not much to fear.
Because there's nothing to fear here.
What the fuck is going on? While neither games are strictly horror, they absolutely nail the feeling of dread, because you never fully understand what you're up against. This allows your dread to stay dread, and it does not turn into fear. This is because the antagonizing forces behind everything are not clear to the player. Hi, thank you if you're still watching. During the next part of the video I will talk about a horror game. To substantiate some points I make, I will have to show some minor jump scares. If this is not your thing, or if you have health issues that might even make jump scares dangerous, you can skip this part by going to 10 minutes and 9 seconds in the video. An example of a game that is strictly survival horror is Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Why can't I turn the brightness any higher? This 2010 classic takes place in Brandenburg Castle, where an unknown entity stalks a player. And also there are monsters. The brilliance of Amnesia lies in that you have no means of fighting back to the monsters. This makes you feel helpless. Unfortunately, the game still relies on the occasional jump scare. I generally lose faith in a horror fiction when they rely on jump scares to be scary. In my opinion, they are a cheap and bad way to build tension and excitement. Also, I don't like them because I can handle this to save my life because I'm a pussy. I find works of fiction that suddenly reveal themselves after being ambiguous, but still leaving a lot of points open to interpretation to be much more impressive. For example, I pondered Bloodborne for days after I finished it. The problem with Amnesia is that the game shows its hand way too early. The entity and the monsters that are a threat to the player both become tangible quite early in the game. I have to admit, being chased by the monster in Amnesia for the first time back in 2010 was one of the most frightening experiences in my life. It does an excellent job of making players feel fear. Amnesia is an excellent horror game for its time and it fully deserves the status it has as a cult classic. That being said, the feeling of dread could have been handled much better. It is by dying a few times to the monster and the entity that you start to understand that you will just respawn and can try again after that. This makes for an experience where the dread turns into fear. as the worst that could happen already happened a few times. On top of that, you can see the things that you've dreaded, and because of that, the dread turns into fear. Because dread is an anticipation and fear is a direct reaction. Don't get me wrong, the monsters are still scary as f**k, but the dread that you felt in the game is pretty much alleviated in the middle of the game by turning it into fear. This is done by explicitly showing the player what they're up against. It's not an anticipation anymore, but rather a reaction. With all of that out of the way, I would like to leave all of you today with this conclusion. It is by being vague, mysterious and ambiguous that you feel the dread in Hollow Knight. You know something f***ed is happening in that world, but you don't know what. Because dread is an anticipation and fear is a direct reaction, it's hard for them to coexist. You don't have anything tangible to fear, so you dread what you're going to find instead. The developers of Hollow Knight favor a dreadful experience over a fearful one by remaining ambiguous and implicit. All the eerie things that happen and all the awful things that are subtly implied make for a captivating experience. Hollow Knight absolutely nails the feeling of dread by remaining mysterious in an interesting way that makes you want to get to the bottom of all of it, even though you dread what you might find. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching until the end of the video. If you liked it, leave a like. If you have any thoughts you want to share, be sure to comment. Peace!